Welcome to Equilibrium Echoes, the podcast where we delve into the transformative power of your inner world on your relationships. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker. Join me as we unlock the secrets of emotional equilibrium and dig deep into the tools and insights needed to foster healthier, more fulfilling relationships in ways that feel safe and authentic. Welcome back to Equilibrium Echoes. I'm your host, Alyssa Decker, and today I'm here with a returning guest, Shiloh Miner. Shiloh is a marriage coach for women, and today we're talking about something that I think is going to be a really fun conversation, and that is happiness. What is happiness? How do you find happiness in a relationship? Who's responsible for your happiness? And what does that even look like? I think sometimes we have these pie in the sky ideas of rainbows and sunshine, and when we see that, we know we're happy, but that's not really what it looks like. So Shiloh, welcome back to the podcast. Thanks so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Thank you. I'm super excited about this topic.
Me too. I think this is going to be a fun one, and maybe not quite as heavy as some of our other conversations here on the podcast, which will be nice. So tell me a little bit about yourself, what you do, and kind of how you see this topic of happiness.
So I'm a love coach for married women. So I help women who are married but not happy, not satisfied, not content, not fulfilled, but they want to stay married. They're not like, this is not the worst thing in the world, but it's also, I'm aggravated. Things are not working. Sometimes I say they love their husbands, but they kind of hate them too. And
so relatable.
Right. And I'm sorry, husband, but that's where I was. He knows. That's how I learned this work. I was in that marriage where I was like, I'm not happy. I'm aggravated. I'm pissed off. I'm depressed. I'm having all these negative emotions. And yet, I love this person. I can see he's a great man, objectively. Now what? And so I went through all those questions. Is this how it's supposed to be? Should I be happy? Is this my thing? Is this him? Is he doing it to me? And through answering those questions essentially for myself and creating ways for women to answer those questions for themselves, I learned how to differentiate between my internal world and my external world, and therefore become someone who can be content and can also influence their sphere. So that's kind of that's the goal in my mind.
I love that, especially that differentiation between outside world and inner world. That's huge, isn't it? Like that plays such a huge part in happiness, however we define it, I think. So how do you define happiness in a relationship?
So when people say, oh, it didn't work out, we got divorced, and you say, what happened? And they would say, I just wasn't happy. I just wasn't happy. And you hear this all the time. And I'm always like, What does that mean? Because I know people who were never happy. We probably have some people like that in your family. They weren't happy before they got married. They weren't happy after they got married. They weren't happy after they got divorced. So like there are some people who haven't figured out how to be happy. And so for me, happiness is kind of a red herring. Because happiness is like an ephemeral emotion. You feel good sometimes, you feel bad sometimes. You feel energetic sometimes, you feel sad sometimes. Or tired. Like, can you be happy and tired at the same time? I see it more as contentment, as satisfaction, or like some level of fulfillment, where you feel like this is where I belong. I feel like I belong here. And sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's amazing, and you get the peaks of romance and passion, excitement. But there's that steady thread of like, I belong here, and it feels right for me to be here.
Okay, so if we're defining happiness more as contentment, which I think is a great way to define it, because like you said, happiness is very fleeting. It comes and goes. So if we're defining it as contentment, whose job is it to create that in a relationship?
So this, again, is tricky when we pull apart the threads, because someone can make you unhappy. They can. We've all experienced that. Someone can be mean to you. They can be harsh with you. They can completely neglect you. And that can bring up loneliness, anger, resentment, the opposite of contentment feelings, feelings that don't leave a lot of room for happy emotions. But at the end of the day, you chose to be with that person. So we can wrap it all up in, it's only an inside job. At the end of the day, in the final analysis. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think there are extreme circumstances where, you know, if you're in an abusive relationship, it's going to be much harder to find contentment in that. But in your average relationship, yes, I think that your outlook and even your emotions really are the inside job, as you were saying. So what do you say to the woman who's like, I've been married, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and it's just never been great. And I'm kind of at that place where it's like, either I find some happiness or I'm out, right? What do you say to her? Like, where does she even start? Because I'm sure at this point she's feeling like, I've tried all the things, right? I've read the books, I've done all the things everyone tells me to do, and it hasn't done anything.
So it's a really good question, like you said, about extreme circumstances, because I start with the extreme circumstances. Like, there's no good in asking her what she's tried if her partner has cheating on her every year, you know?
Yeah.
There's no trying things for that. Or if he can't make money, like if he's just not contributing, maybe he could hypothetically contribute in other ways. Often there's no ways when that's going on. If someone is dead weight on your couch, there are no magic tricks for that. This person has to contribute to you.
Yes.
And this is something that sounds obvious when it's not your own life, but so many women will say, you know, he tried, or he was depressed, or then he had this, and then he had his dad die, but when you ask them, what does this person contribute to your life? And if you cannot come up with anything, that is your first, I suppose, you know, when we're ruling things out, like at the doctors, you are ruled out of anything that you can internally magically fix in that scenario. Because to me, the foundation of a relationship is contribution. People have to be giving something beneficial to one another. People say, oh, that's transactional. What about unconditional love? No. Relationships are conditional. Relationships are conditional. Love, the emotion, the compassion can be unconditional. You can love someone from a distance and say, go in peace. But you cannot have a relationship between two people where there is not some kind of healthy exchange. It doesn't have to be tangible things. It could be someone is funny and you love the joy they bring to your life. Someone else can be just such a fantastic parent that you love watching them parent, and you're like, man, the value I get from your parenting is worth I don't know how much. Or they could make great money and just allow that to be off your back. You know, like I don't have to worry about the finances because this person is such a provider. And so that's not sufficient. I consider those necessary but not sufficient criteria. But you need to have one of them. You need to be able to point to something in your life that this person brings a benefit to you. And if you really can't do that, then what has happened is you have put yourself in a corner. Like you've painted yourself into a corner where now you're going to try to use mindset work and prayer to feel good about something that can't work. And that's what I mean about it's your responsibility in the end. I don't mean that you can be contented in any situation. I mean, if you're in a situation that is untenable, you would need to get out of that situation to find peace and contentment.
Right.
And so I always start with those basement criteria, like, is there, you know, care? Is there some kind of contribution? Does this person not call you names? You know, like if they call you names and it's any kind of regularity, that person is taking from you. They're taking too much, right? Now, that doesn't mean it's over, but it means that boundaries would we have to set around those key areas. And if that person can't come up to the challenge, then you know that a life with them includes name calling or zero contribution, and that would be your life. And you have to be clear-eyed and come to terms with that.
Yeah. Okay, so this woman who's really frustrated,
Yeah.
she's just listened to you and she's like, well, he does contribute. I mean, he has a job and he comes home and, you know, He helps the kids with their baths, and there's a few moments where things seem pretty good. But 75% of the time, we're just not connected. We're just like, ugh, like really feels like more work than joy. What do you say to her?
So I would say I've got good news for you because you've got the foundation set. You're decent human beings who take care of each other, who take care of a home. Sounds like there's trust. Sounds like this person's not either spending money wildly or talking to girls on the internet. All those haywire factors don't exist in your life. So you might think, well, that's a low bar. Like, this is depressing. And it is a low bar, but it's a foundation. It's something you can build on. So actually, that is my favorite kind of client. Because they think, this is so hard, this is so dead, this person is such a cold fish, there's no spark. But spark can be created from thoughts, from a smile, from changing your perspective on who you are, from starting a new hobby. Like, there's lots of cool little ways that I help people to bring back the spark. And the reason it's so bad right now is because you're in a downward spiral, which means every time he showed up and like didn't make eye contact, you were like, oh, I hate my life. And then you got depressed. And then every time he looked at you, you were like glaring at him. And he was like, ooh, stay away from her. And then the next day it happened, but it got worse. And then you stopped looking at each other and you stopped even hoping for connection from this person because it was too disappointing. So you think that this is who they are and this is who you are, but it's actually the worst versions of both of you.
That's really interesting because I think we get caught in this, we get in that downward spiral. And then what we tell ourselves, the story we tell ourselves is he doesn't care. He doesn't love me anymore. He's not trying. I tried to plan this date night and he wouldn't go. So therefore he's not interested in investing in this relationship. Like we start to create all these narratives in our heads. And usually those narratives are more about the other person than they are about us. Would you say that's true?
100%. I would say the first thought for women as an instinctual go-to is he doesn't care. Because when we see what is the typical masculine shutdown, like when stuff starts going bad in a relationship, typically the man puts a wall up, just a little thin veneer. And you go, oh, he's different. And then he puts another one and another one. And he retracts from you and he closes off his heart. So from our experience, there's no caring. We can't feel his heart. It's like you can't get to it. And so you think it must not be there because I can't tell. If I liked someone, I wouldn't act like that. But that's his defense mechanism, probably because he really cares. And he doesn't want to go there. Like, he doesn't want to register consciously or talk to you about the fact that he can tell that you're disappointed in him and that you don't flirt with him anymore. And maybe he's worried you're not attracted to him anymore because every time you talk to him, he's doing something wrong. So men will typically not tell you that, they feel hurt, rejected, disrespected, disregarded, left out somehow. They just take incremental steps away from you. Not because they don't care. So yeah, I think that's a huge one, is that we tell ourselves that story, and then as soon as we believe that story, guess what happens? We do the same thing. Well, if this guy doesn't care about me, I'm not going to show my heart to him. I'm not going to flirt or be friendly because he doesn't even care about me. That would be pathetic. So then we mask it as high self-worth. I'm not taking that shit. And we get really indignant and self-righteous. But we're just protecting our hurt hearts. Right? I don't want him to see that I want him. And like, I was there, man. Getting rejected in marriage is the worst. Because you're stuck with this person. They picked you, and now they're rejecting you, and you're stuck in a house together? You're like, what an ego burn. Like, what do I do now, right? When you're young and you're dating, okay, move on, right? But now you've committed to this person, and you're getting messages that feel like, I'm not good enough for you. And I think that's the other story underneath he doesn't care, that we really don't want to interact with, but that makes us feel like total garbage, is he must not be attracted to me anymore. I'm not doing a good enough job at mothering, cleaning, cooking, whatever we may hold ourselves to. And so that's why he's not paying attention to me. These two stories are almost always wrong, I might add. That's the good news.
But they
They're
don't
wrong.
feel wrong.
They
don't
so
feel
right.
wrong in the
They
moment.
They do. They feel so right.
We love to hold on to them so tightly because it feels safer than letting go of those stories and exploring what's underneath.
Yes. And we've tried. And that's where I want to give you all compassion. I know you've all tried. You're like, but I did ask him on a date. And I did say the thing like, hey, I'm lonely. Can we spend more time together? And he didn't even answer me. And then I made that decision to never open up my heart ever again. And and I'm sorry, but if you do choose to be married and not give up on it, it is a courageous act of continual heart opening after rupture. That is the price of a true love story. And it's scary.
It is scary.
Yeah.
And there may be times when you wonder, like, is this even worth it? Like, I want to be happy. I don't really want to be divorced.
Yeah.
But man, like, this sucks.
Yeah. And part of it is that you don't have the skills. Like, this is something that I fought through because I had read so many books on relationships and I thought of myself as, emotionally aware and a clear communicator. So I had told him what I wanted and done the clear communicating that everybody says you should do. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I learned in the recovery of my marriage is that we are instinctual beings. We're not just conscious thinker-talkers. We have primal instincts that make us attracted to people or repelled from them. And it's like animals. It's like apes. And if we don't understand that, we're missing half the equation of what romance is. Like, why did you fall in love with someone in the first place? It wasn't because you thought it was a good proposition to be with them. Your body was like, I have to have them. This one. Like, I don't care about the red flags. Give me this one. It was the instincts that drove you into the relationship and that made you think it's always going to feel like this forever. But then the hormones wear off and you think that they tricked you. Oh, they tricked me. They act so good at the beginning and now they're so lazy. And it's actually because both of you were at your best. You were madly in love. You were flirty, happy, playful, feeling like this person likes me. So everything was clicking on all cylinders. And then the first person who kind of lost a little bit of the hormones and withdrew a little bit, the other person went, oh my God, what's happening? And then you both retreated and got mad and were like, who is this person? I don't even know who they are. So one of the things that will totally change the way, can heal relationships so quickly is the nonverbals, the ability to recognize that your husband doesn't need a big conversation from you. If you literally, my clients will work with me, not talk to their husbands about working with me, not even have to tell him, and I'll say, let's work through the resentment, because you cannot feel in love with resentment. You can't receive from him. He might be trying to love you. You won't be able to feel it because you're still living in the past. So they're like, okay, it's hard work, but I want this. So we work through the resentment. And then I say, now when you see him, I just want you to exhale, relax your belly, and just smile at him and make eye contact. That's all you have to do. Just try it. And they're like, oh my God. He came over and talked to me for 30 minutes. He hasn't talked to me in 10 years. It's because you sent the nonverbal green light to him. Universal. Relaxed body posture, a smile, and some eye contact. And these things are so simple, but they're so powerful.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to get a little more into the specific strategies here for someone who's wanting to give it a go. But first,
yes.
I want to address this issue of this, because you've mentioned it a couple of times, this ego burn of I think that's the other thing that keeps us stuck sometimes, other than those internal narratives, is that thought of why do I always have to be the one to go first?
Yeah.
Right? Why do I always have to be the one that sucks it up and apologizes or whatever? So address that for a minute, because if we can't get past that, none of these strategies are going to help.
You said it so well. I think every client of mine, my thinking has all gone there. We've all been to that wall of why? This is not fair. I've already put in a lot of effort. Why am I now having to take a master class in human relationships? Right? Like, this person should do it, not me. I've done my time, we'll say stuff like that.
Right.
And what I always say is, you don't have to. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to even try. You could walk out the door, or you could sit and be stagnant. We have to remember, we really don't have to do anything. But we're taking this victim stance of, he's making me, so I have to. But he is not telling you to do anything. He's doing him over there, and you're going, I need something here. I'm starving. This sucks. So the reality in human behavior is the person who's in more pain takes the first action. The person who's more conscious and more able takes the first action. And it's just because we can. Like, if you have the awareness to go, I could do the work and go first, you're already kind of raised your hand, cosmically speaking.
Dang it.
Yeah, right? And then you could back off and say, no, it's not fair. And that would be fine. But because you know better, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
So when you're at that precipice of not fair, it's a moment of choice where you really are standing on the precipice of, am I going to stick with this story where I don't get what I want, but I don't have to risk very much either, right? I stay with the familiar story of, my husband doesn't treat me right, even though I'm a good woman, he's an asshole, which is, again, satisfying to the ego. Very nice. You can complain to many women who will agree with you on the internet and spend days commiserating. Or you take this radical leap of, I'm going to dig deeper. I've already done all this, but because I want this so much, whether it's my values, whether it's my kids, whether it's, just my commitment to myself, because I want to have an expansive love story, I'm going to do the work to get it. And when you make that mind shift, like, nothing can stop you now, honestly.
Yeah. I tell clients all the time, fair is the enemy of peace.
Oh,
like, if
I
you
like
keep
that.
holding on to fair, you're pushing your peace further away. You can't really cling to this idea of fairness and also get this peace and happiness that you want. Like, those two things it's like oil and water. And I love the way you describe that. Okay. So we've now got someone listening who's like, okay, fine. All right, fine. Like, I'll just, like, tell me what to do because I don't want to get divorced, and I'll be the one who goes first. So give her some really practical things. Because she may even not be all the way in yet, but she's like, okay, tell me how to figure out if there's even hope here.
Right.
In this situation.
So there's two things you need for hope. One is that you believe he's a good man. If you don't think he's a good guy, you don't have it in you to give him what he needs, right? He needs respect and admiration. If you really don't think he's, like, a really good person and he's done some things that he can't come back from in your eyes, then you should let him go, because you won't be able to muster up that kind of energy or open-heartedness. The second thing is you have to want it a lot, because why would you do the work otherwise? Right?
Yeah.
But your desire is the after that other part is the most potent indicator of if you can do it or not. Because then you'll have more stamina, you'll have more persistence, you'll have more patience, you'll have more compassion for yourself and for him, because your vision is so big, right? Like, my clients are romantics. They're like, I want the love story. Like, come hell or high water. It's what I live for. Like, I dreamed of this. Often they're in their second or third relationship and they're like, I see what went wrong, but this time I'm all in. Like, I'm going to do it. And so those are the two things. So what you need after you make those choices is to do everything in your power to make your lifestyle magnificent. Like, your own personal lifestyle. And this comes back to our conversation about happiness. You cannot be happy if you haven't looked at yourself and gone, do I like my lifestyle? Do I like what I do? Am I doing stuff that lights me up or makes me feel good about myself or is exciting because I'm learning something new? When our relationship is unhappy, we put so much focus on the relationship that often we have stopped doing the stuff we love.
Yeah.
And we've just gone, well, life is hard and I'm just surviving and it's awful. So the first radical out of the box thing is you don't ask permission for this. You just start doing it. And you let the chips fall. So that might mean you leave your husband with the kids more often. It might mean you go out with friends when he doesn't want you to. Like, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you can't blame him anymore for how your life is. That's the trap we get in.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as you're blaming him, now you can't move, right? Because you're like, I would be happy, but he keeps doing these things. Now, if he's abusive again, he can actually stop you, like with finances or with fear. But often in the types of relationships I work with, it's just his dissatisfaction. You don't want to see him be irritated. You don't want to see him be a little annoyed. Let him be annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
We'll do it. So this kind of audacity is required. Step one.
Yes, a little annoyance never killed anyone.
No, it didn't.
But we're so afraid of that. Like, we feel like somehow we're making things worse, or part of that, I think, comes from learning how to detach a little bit. Like, if he's annoyed because I went and did something that feeds my soul and makes me happy, I have to learn how to not carry that and make that my responsibility. Yeah, because I think so often
because it's not worth it because he'll be mad.
Yes. So we've made his anger or his annoyance our responsibility, and it's not. It's not our responsibility. At least not in this scenario. I mean, if we're intentionally annoying him, then that's a whole different story.
We're just baiting him with awfulness. But yeah, it's like you said, it's easier said than done. So this is the internal work that I think you do and I do, where we go deep into what part of you is so terrified to upset this person that it feels impossible to displease them. Like, that's a heavy trigger and a hook that it really helps to work with someone to untangle. Otherwise, you keep getting bumped up into, like, his feelings will be messed up and then I will be messed up. So I can't move. I'm stuck back where I started.
And if I do anything here, I'm just going to make everything worse. So then I'm stuck in indecision and can't do anything.
You do need to rock the boat.
Right, exactly. You have to. You have to rock the boat or nothing changes.
That's right.
So I'm taking some steps to start making myself happy again. Yeah. Then what? Well,
at that stage is when you release resentment. Because now you've built up enough emotional capital, in a sense. You're not burnt out and drained that how could you do this process? How can you let go of resentment when you're exhausted? So once you get a bit happy, you get a bit confident, then you start letting go of baggage. Again, you probably need a support person to do that with you, because they'll help you to feel really heard and validated before you let it go.
Which is a huge part of resentment, I think, is compounded when we don't feel like there's anyone who is validating how we feel or doesn't really see how we feel. And if you're stuck in one of these relationships, or you feel stuck, I should say, in one of these relationships, the odds are very high that that other person, your spouse, is not going to be the one to provide that validation for you.
Very good point.
And so it is. And oftentimes a best friend isn't going to either, at least not in the way that you need, because what you need is someone who can validate that and show you the way through it and past it. And it doesn't really help, does it, to just sit around with friends on a Friday night having drinks and just commiserate? Like, that isn't what we're talking about when we're talking about validation. Explain that a little more. What do we mean when we say validation? Because it's not just that, oh, girl, I feel you, like my husband does the same thing. Like, that's not quite it, is it?
No, it isn't. I'm so glad you brought this up, because this is a very critical piece to how we deal with our hurt feelings. So one way is to go, I call it co-signing. Like, you go to your friends and say, my husband was an asshole, I'm hard done by, and they say, yes, girl, he's an asshole. That's co-signing on your victimhood, right? That keeps you a victim.
Yes.
You can't leave victimhood with that game, because that's
and
what we all agreed. It feels good, and we all agreed on it.
It feels good for a while.
Yeah. So how do you get out? Because that's the cosign, is that we all are connected in how shitty men are, or how shitty our husbands are, or kids, whatever thing, and our lives are hard. And we need the witnessing, but a little bit of poison comes in with it, which is the co-signing on victimhood. When you do it with a skilled practitioner, they hold you like a child. That sucked. And we might even cry with you, because we know how much it sucked. That hurt. And we let it all flow. Just tears. Usually snot. We let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And then we say, what are we going to do now? How are we going to feel better now? What's the next step that's going to take us up from this? We're not going to live here. This is a heavy backpack that does nothing but, it's the past. It's over. So you make a decision you don't want to carry it anymore, and we facilitate you putting it down. And then you are like 100 pounds lighter.
Yep.
It's a really, really sweet moment.
It is. And I think that's a beautiful illustration of the difference. I love that. I've never heard that before about the cosigner. I think that's really a great illustration of what happens there. That's why when we go out with our girlfriends and we commiserate, we feel better for a short time, right? But it doesn't last, because we walk back in the house and we're back in that situation, and we're right back where we started. Yeah. And that's the difference between really addressing the resentment and letting it go versus just having someone that makes us feel better for a few minutes.
And it's even worse than that, because it compounds the story. Like, if your girlfriends are like, oh, he did that? You feel even worse about your husband. You're like, even my girlfriends think he's bad. Maybe I'm dumb for putting up with him. Like, it compounds the story of how he's wrong and you're a victim. And when you let go of resentment, you bring in new stories. Like, oh, maybe he wasn't even wrong. Maybe it was miscommunication. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he was wrong, but it wasn't personal. There's so many ways it could have been. Or maybe you were so insecure that you baited him into it. That happens.
Yes.
Tell me how I look in this dress. I know I look terrible. Like when we're having a bad moment, sometimes we do that to our husbands. That's why they think that questions are traps. That's men's thing. They think questions are traps.
Because sometimes they are.
Because sometimes they are. Because sometimes we are manifesting our fears onto them. And to have someone show you that at first hurts your ego, because it feels a little bit better to be the perfect one while he's a jerk. But after you get over that hump, it's like, oh, I don't have to feel that bad anymore every time he says that. Oh, that wasn't like a personal chop your head off moment. That's actually great. I can now relax.
Oh, yes. Oh, these vicious cycles we get caught in.
Yeah.
So give me a couple of practical things. Like you mentioned the one about, just relaxing your body and making eye contact and smiling. What are some other practical things that that women can do to kind of dip their toe in here and start breaking some of these cycles?
So if you want your husband to start making eye contact and opening his body language to you, and maybe like touching you once in a while, like a hug, this is going to be really sound old school, but it always works like a charm, is you thank him for the things he's already doing really well. You say all the things you've taken for granted that he's been doing for 10 years, but seems like a low bar to you, and women don't like to do that. Be like, thank you for coming home every day. Thank you for paying the bills that you pay. Thank you for doing the jobs that you do. Name them and just be like, thank you. And say how it lifts your load, because it does. I don't have to do this because you do it. I get to focus on something else I love because you do that. And what this does is it validates the masculine core. Like, they have these things that are really important to their self-identity that they feel like are the bulk of their contribution to you, that we tend to write off because we're not getting the emotional stuff we need. So we're like, oh, but if the emotional stuff was there, it'd be easy for me to thank him. But if we start first by just being like, yeah, that stuff matters. I'm going to validate him. I'm going to genuinely thank him. It will create chemistry. It will create warmth between you. He will visibly change his behavior. And if you do this consistently, he will start doing more things for you that you didn't ask. I can guarantee you that. Take it to the bank. Try it. Write us. Because I have clients who are like, he started vacuuming. He's never, ever vacuumed. Or like, he like bought me a card randomly. Like, he's never bought me a card. Because when you show appreciation, it sends a message to them that goes, oh, I'm doing things that work, and that felt really good. I'm going to try to do more stuff that gets validation, that gets appreciation. This is the primal things I was talking about. You're just working on simple human behavior, and it's a really simple way to open his heart. And the good thing is that typically men don't carry resentment the way we do. And the downside of that is they forget that they hurt your feelings and they don't know how to talk about it later. So that's why we don't ask them for validation. That's the downside. But the upside is they can really recover quickly when they get some of their needs met. They can just kind of bounce back and be like, oh, things are good again. My wife's happy with me. And you can see really quick transformations.
Okay, but I know the thought is in some people's minds right now. But if I validate these low bar, bare minimum things, he's going to think that's all he needs to do.
Right. And that is because we think that's how men calculate. But that's the opposite of their calculation. They like to do stuff for us. When they get appreciated. That's like their whole mode of being. Like, that's why they built skyscrapers and stuff. That's why. That's the Taj Mahal. Like, we feel so neglected as women. We feel so small. But we are the center of the universe to them. It's just that when they feel like they can't please us, they kind of just block us out of their vision. And then we feel really neglected. But as soon as they feel like this is a place where they can win and this woman likes them and thinks they're successful at anything, honestly, they'll just do more and more stuff. You'll get more from them immediately. They don't have a mindset of, oh, she thanked me, so I'm done. They're like, what's the next level? They play video games. I want to level up to the next one. For real.
Okay, so I'm seeing where you're going with this, right? I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I think there are probably some people listening who are as well. But the elephant in the room for a lot of women, I think, is, or one of them, because there can be many, is this idea that all he really wants from me is sex. And if I don't give him that, then nothing else counts. Nothing else really matters to him except that one thing. Right. And if I smile and make eye contact, that's what he's going to think, that I'm open to that. Or if I give him compliments, that's where he's going to go first. So what about that? How do you address that? What would you tell her who, because I know I have some women in my practice who are like, if I make eye contact, then I don't even have, like, he's all in and that's the end of that. There is no conversation because he thinks if I do any little thing, that's where we're headed.
So the first question is, do you want to have sex with him? And if you don't, that's where we go. Because it's supposed to be fun for you. Like, it's supposed to be great. If it's not great and you're like, oh no, he thinks I want sex. You know, like we have this convention around men wanting sex and women keeping it away from them, you know, because often the sex is not good enough, frankly. Foreplay, which for women is everything, is like non-existent. You're not going to like it. Nothing's wrong with you if you don't like it if there's no foreplay. So I would start actually there, because the one thing that romantic relationships have is sex. That's the only thing different from all the other stuff.
Right.
So he's not wrong that, like, oh good, things are good. Now we have sex. We're a couple, right? Now he's saying that you have needs still, right? That come before the sex.
Exactly.
Right? So this is the chicken and the egg thing with men and women that always happens. So that's where you learn the little pauses, right? Oh, he's coming at you now. Hey, I would really love to hear something that you appreciate about me right now. Hey, you know, this would be a good idea, but I'm needing some communication first. I'd love to be able to tell you about my day. That would really get me in the mood. Like, they're not computing that this is like hasty. You haven't listened to me. You haven't said a nice thing in like years. Because they don't need those things, right?
Right.
So they don't know that they're like trying to rob without giving, right? They're not giving anything. And this again takes that audacity to be like, oh, he might get annoyed when I do that.
Yeah.
He might be a little, whoo, now you want things? I used to just go in there and you let me, right?
Right.
You're changing the rules up. No, I have some price of admission over here. We're upping standards. And what's really cool is if you can stay warm when you do this, if you can not totally like, get off me. Why are you so pushy, right? If you can keep your energy Of course he wants to have sex with me. I'm a beautiful woman. I'm his wife. Let it be ego for you. Let it be confidence building, because it should be, right? Your husband should want to have sex with you. And you're going to just push him off a little bit and teach him what he needs to get closer to you. And if he grumps and pouts, let him go away and grump and pout. And then the next time you smile at him, you do it again. The other thing about them, again, they want to win. And if it worked once, they'll try to do the same thing every time, right? Like, that's why sex gets boring for women. Because they're like, that worked every time. And so again, we have to be pretty brave and pretty bold and pretty clear on what we need, right? And probably work with someone who gives you some language around that. How do you reject a man without shutting him down, crushing his ego in the process? But allowing yourself the dignity of, I don't want to make love to someone when I don't feel my heart is open at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that goes back to releasing that resentment.
Right.
And being willing to be the first one to rock the boat and change things up. I mean, I would say in my experience, I can almost guarantee he's going to be annoyed when you do that. Like, there's really no, very, very rarely would there be another scenario there where he was like, oh, okay, let me compliment you and do 30 minutes of foreplay to get what I want. Like, that sounds great.
Right.
But some of that comes back to also being willing to start speaking up for yourself and defending your own boundaries, because we get in these relationships and we let all of that erode over time. We stop taking care of ourselves. We stop speaking up for ourselves. We stop defending our boundaries because it's just easier to wallow, right? Or it's just easier to be the victim. And part of reclaiming your marriage, the way that we're talking about here, is starting to reclaim your own voice and speak up for yourself in ways that he can receive, not in ways that are going to shut him down further. Would you say that's accurate?
You said that so well, and it's a huge part of it, because instead of speaking up for ourselves, we shut down, right? Our sexuality shuts down, our heart shuts down. Last thing on earth we want is to be touched, because we associate that with the lack of care, the lack of attention, the lack of communication. And so I know most women want to have great sex lives. It's just so far away from their thinking because they've shut down instead of spoken up. That's what it.
Right.
Speak up instead of shut down. Keep your heart open, keep your body alive, dance, do things that make you feel like a sexual person. Because that's one part where we can also take responsibility, is we want the man to like turn us on and like woo us and seduce us, and that's fun, and he should. But also as women, our sexuality is so tied to our mindset and our physical well-being, right?
Yeah.
If we're not taking care of ourselves, if we have negative self-talk about our bodies, that's a turnoff. We've just turned ourselves off. Even if he thinks we're gorgeous, but we're like, oh, I ate too much pizza tonight. Like, we're going to have something where we turn ourselves off. And so I always think it's two sides with opening hearts or sexuality or anything. One hand, you need to stand up, communicate. And, when you said like, oh, he'd be annoyed, I thought, absolutely. But better than you hating sex.
Yeah.
Because if you hate sex, that relationship is over. Like, it's going to end. So even though in the short term, he'll be kind of irritated and he'll grumble because, he was getting excited and he got disappointed. Like, whatever. People get frustrated when they get excited and they get disappointed. Everybody does.
He was probably frustrated to begin with because of the lack of sex.
Exactly. So I was like, she put a barrier up. I'm going to lose my mind now. Go let him dig a ditch and then try again tomorrow. But yeah, but the cost to us, like, I always say it's better that they're mad than we're mad. Because we always take it. We always, like, it falls on us. Oh, I don't want him to be upset, but that means you're going to be upset. I don't want him to be irritated, but now I'm either not having sex that I like, or I'm never having sex at all, because that's my only way to avoid it. Is that the life you want? Let him be mad. That's the best advice I have.
I did a live event last week, or 2 weeks ago, with about 200 women. And one of the things I said that really, really resonated for a lot of people, and I think it fits in this conversation, is when you avoid conflict, you're not really ending the conflict. You're just moving it inside of you.
Oh, I love that.
And I think that's so true. I love how you said it a little bit differently, like better he's mad than I'm mad,
Yeah.
right? Because we're the ones who have to work through this resentment, and we're the ones in this scenario taking the strides to improve the relationship. But we think all of this peacekeeping and people pleasing and avoiding the argument that we're doing is somehow making the relationship better. But in fact, it's really making it worse because we're just internalizing all of that conflict. And if we can learn to be okay with there being some friction and there being some conflict, it's so counterintuitive, but that's often the way that we see progress. Like, that's often the path to get us to a healthy and happy relationship.
I want to tell a story about this. I have a client whose husband is a little bit explosive, so he yells, and then he's kind of cold the rest of the time. So she's like starving, right? Like, I'm trying to spend time with him, and he's always like, I'm busy. And then every once in a while just freaks out about nothing. And so she's like, that's really stressful. It sucks, right? And so I was telling her, if he yells at you and he's like a jerk to the kids, just avoid him for a while. Like, he has earned your distance. Like, stay out of his way. And she's like, oh yeah, normally I'd try and go and make a repair. I'm like, he doesn't deserve a repair. You deserve a repair. Go away, right? Like, just do your own thing, get your own space, right? And this is the self-worth, right? Someone treats me like garbage and I have self-worth. I just want to go away from them. I don't want to fix it right away. That's the fawning, right? So she goes away from him and she goes, he apologized twice within like 3 minutes. And I'm like, you're doing it. And she goes, and then later I'm at the computer and I'm feeling a back massage. I'm thinking it's my daughter. It's my husband giving me a back massage. And I was like, you're onto it. Keep going. And then she goes, and then at night he says to me, when he's cuddling me, he said, this is the best part of my day. And I was like, oh, he would never have said something like that to her. But because she had stopped fawning and chasing for his attention, his validation, his approval, and she had demonstrated that her standards are higher than that by silence. You don't have to say anything. You just don't operate when the person is being a jerk. And he came around and was just better. Like, this is what you're saying. She was a bit more mean by her own standards, you know? She's always a super nice, super fix-it mom. So she was like, I'm a bit cold. I kind of don't care. I'm like, that's your standards coming up. Good for you.
Yes. Oh, but there's such a stereotype or such a cultural expectation on women that we are always going to be the fix-it person. We're going to make everything better for everyone. And we shouldn't be mean, or we shouldn't be aggressive, or we shouldn't, like, we can should ourselves to death, right? And those things. But when we get past that, it can be really powerful for our relationships.
It's amazing. And I really think it's instinctual. I think that's why we all do it. Like, if you are out in the woods and there's no cops and there's no government, you need that big man on your side. You'll do anything to keep him on your side. You don't care how he treats you, you need him on your side. And also you need him to protect your kids. So the kind of self-betrayal that we would have generationally practiced just for survival, like, it would have been necessary. We're only a short few generations out of that.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's a beautiful opportunity we have to show up with, like, what we really want, but it's news to us that we get to have needs. Or we get to upset a man. Oh my goodness, we get to do that now? I mean, even now, people in abusive relationships can't upset a man, because if you don't have a man who's at least somewhat honorable, he can hurt you. So our animal nature, our primal nature remembers this, right? So it's a real consciousness healing effort to go, I am safe to upset the big man in my house. I will not die.
Right. Oh, I will not die. That's a big thing, because our nervous system doesn't like anything unfamiliar.
Yes.
And because to our nervous systems, everything that has worked in the past, or at least kept us from dying, that's how our nervous system would define worked, right? If it didn't kill us, then it's safe and it's good. And anything unfamiliar is unsafe, is inherently dangerous. And we have to really, this is where, again, sitting with a skilled practitioner can really help, because overriding your nervous system or retraining your nervous system is a challenge, but it's also a big piece of this puzzle to help you feel like it's really okay if I do this thing that I've never done before.
Your nervous system needs evidence, right? Like this friend of mine, who's friend and a client, she's coming out of people-pleasing mode. She doesn't think it's going to work, right? Mm-hmm. She thinks she's just going to get more distance. Well, he never comes to me anyways. If I go distance, there's going to be nothing. There'll be no relationship. But I was telling her it's recalibrating, right? She was going towards him so much that he could always just retreat. As soon as she comes back to balance, he comes towards her. But she didn't believe it until it happened, right? She needed evidence.
Right. Yes. And the only way to get the evidence is to try it. Like, that's the catch-22 of this whole scenario. Yes. All right. So, Shiloh, leave us with some parting words, a thought that you would like to leave the women who are listening to this conversation with. And then I would love for you to just kind of wrap up by telling people how they can connect with you.
Awesome. So, I've been pondering how women feel like everything is on them. Like, we have to do all the hard work, all the emotional heavy lifting. We're figuring out all the emotional stuff, and why us, why us, why us? And I want to reframe that too. It's because we are the most powerful mover in the operation. We make the biggest difference when we move. We change the whole system just by thinking differently about the people in the system. And so even though it can feel like a burden at first, I want you to feel like you're the queen of this operation, because you are. When you step into that role, you do get more respect, you get more appreciation, you get more attention. It takes a whole bunch of courage, but I know you have it in you.
Yes. I love that. All right. So tell the listeners where they can find you, how they can connect with you and work with you.
Awesome. So you can go to www.shilohminer.com, where you can get a free guide to the top 5 ways we sabotage ourselves. People pleasing is one of them. Overgiving is another one. You can find out the rest. It really will outline for you how these are counterproductive, even though they feel like the nice thing to do. So you can check that out. I also have space in my one-on-one mentorship, Magical Marriage Mentorship. And this is the Cadillac of coaching, where you get 3 months to completely change the pattern in your relationship. You can go from being the chaser, being neglected, feeling not good enough, to having your husband looking at you like he did at the beginning, excited to talk to you, wanting to do more for you. And it's just so amazing because it doesn't take that long when you really go all in. As part of that, you get my my Happily Married Woman program, which is a course that includes my entire process, so you can work through it and basically gain the skills to handle any situation. Because there are universal principles of love and attraction. There are universal principles of caring for yourself that once you master them, they change all your relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. I would say I find the same thing to be true and with my clients is if you're working on changing one relationship, like buckle up because it's going to change all of them and in good ways. Like the ripple effect is very real. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. I think there's a lot of people that are going to find this conversation very helpful. And I just appreciate you carving time out to have the conversation.
Thank you. I always enjoy your questions and that you ask the hard things that everybody's thinking. So I hope they got their questions answered.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Join us again soon for another episode of Equilibrium Echoes. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Equilibrium Echoes. If you would like to learn more about the podcast, visit www.coachingwithalyssa.com/podcast. And while you're there, book your free consultation and download the preview of my new book, Marriage is Hard and Other Lies I Believed. I'll see you in the next episode.